time, Trump's a little different. I always said he might liberate Palestine by accident.
Wars are absolutely messy. People die. And people die in Gaza because Hamas started a war that it knew it couldn't win.
You can't bomb a whole building because you think there's one bad guy in it.
Just a lot of things that are semi-attached to reality.
You can't start a war and then complain when you lose it, though. They're dancing in the streets, everyone's happy, declared a beaming Donald Trump today. Indeed, cries of Donald Trump, ringing through what's left of Gaza City from what I must say are not very starving-looking Palestinians would not have been on many people's 2025 bingo cards. Meanwhile, just 40 miles away in Tel Aviv's Hostage Square, they were flying the Stars and Stripes and shouting Nobel Prize for Trump. Yes, the same man the media wrote off as a fascist and reckless, as dangerous, as unfit for diplomacy, is now being talked about as a Nobel Peace Prize winner. Love him or loathe him, President Trump appears to be on the cusp of securing what decades of presidents, diplomats, and experts have all failed to do. And he says all of the hostages are coming home on Monday. President Trump's unique blend of business, show business, and brute force has convened the Gulf states, the hardline Israelis, and the filleted Hamas, and brought them all to the table. Listen to what Secretary of State Marco Rubio told the cabinet today.
You know, I don't know if one day perhaps the entire story will be told about the events of yesterday, but suffice it to say, it's not an exaggeration that none of it would have been possible without the President of the United States being involved.
The cabinet all on best behaviour, and it was of course done with high drama, live on TV last night with Rubio handing the president a note signalling the deal was close as the global media watched on. But will that be a big enough prize for the self-proclaimed President of Peace? Nominations for the 2025 Nobel Peace Prize, which is due to be announced tomorrow, closed on January the 31st. So yesterday's remarkable breakthrough is unlikely to count towards this year's gong. Yet the case against giving Donald Trump the much-coveted medal next year is looking shakier by the hour. Tonight, live in DC with me is Christina Bobb, attorney for Judicial Watch and author of the newly released book, Defiant, Inside the Mar-a-Lago Raid and the Left's Ongoing Lawfare. Christina's with me for the hour. Let's start with this amazing moment, live on TV, a made-for-TV moment for the made-for-TV president. Is this going to go down as one of Donald Trump's finest hours?
I think so, and I think it coincides very well with his last administration. He brought peace to the Middle East last time, and he's temporarily. But the fact that he's bringing hostages home this time, I think, is particularly noteworthy. So yes, he continues to bring peace all over the world, and I think he's getting results that really nobody else has been able to get.
Given that the Nobel Peace Committee shut the nominations for the prize just 2 weeks after the inauguration, the President was talking in the Oval Office earlier tonight about the fact that he's solved 8-9 wars, all these different conflicts he's brought to heel. Do you think he'll get it tomorrow, or do you think it'll have to be next year?
I hope he gets it tomorrow, but I suspect it will probably be next year. I think, the hostages aren't back yet. Yeah. So I think it needs to play itself out. But if he doesn't get it tomorrow, he absolutely needs to get it next year.
All right, let's bring in some excerpts. I'm joined tonight by National Security Analyst Dan Feferman and pro-Palestine activist Amer Zahr. Amer, good evening. Welcome back to the show. You like to see Donald Trump get the Nobel Peace Prize?
I don't think he's got there yet, and I don't know if he will. Look, I don't think you can get a peace prize for simply stopping a war. I mean, it's a big deal. But I'll tell you what, if Trump goes ahead and recognizes a Palestinian state like many other European countries have done in Australia, if he says that the Palestinians deserve an unconditional right to self-determination, and he makes sure that the world accepts that, including Israel, and he stands on a stage and he shakes hands. Hey, I heard he's going to go to Egypt on Monday to be there for the signing of the deal between Hamas and Israel. So does that mean that Hamas now is going to be a legitimate political player with him in his mind? I think he's got to do a lot more. And I think it's all about recognizing the legitimate aspirations and the unconditional aspirations of the Palestinian people. We deserve the right to self-determination. If he can say that, and you never know, Trump is not your traditional foreign policy president. He's not like Joe Biden, who said, I'm a Zionist all the time. Trump's a little different. I always said he might liberate Palestine by accident, and who knows, it might happen.
We've heard from Hamas tonight, all but accepting this round of the conflict is over. But how's this gone down with ordinary Palestinian people you've spoken to, I'm sure, in the last 24, 48 hours? We saw those remarkable scenes on the streets of Gaza City today, something I've never seen certainly before, of Donald Trump being cheered to the rafters. Is that reflective of the wider Palestinian community?
Well, as you might imagine, Harry, people want the killing to stop. People want the war to stop. Political stuff can be figured out afterwards. Right now, the most important thing is that the war is going to end. The killing will stop, and we reach a political solution to make that happen. Look, I think when Netanyahu accepted the deal last week or the week before in the White House, he probably didn't think Hamas would accept the deal. He didn't think that all this pressure would come down for them to accept the deal. I remember on your show, I said, I think the pressure will be so hard that they're going to have to accept the deal, and they did. And now I think Netanyahu might be scrambling to get out of it. But at the end of the day, the people are celebrating because the killing's going to stop. They're not celebrating a political solution or anything like that. And so if they're thanking President Trump for stopping the killing, I think that's great. And I would say that, as much as I don't believe in a lot of things that President Trump does, that if he stops the killing, that's good. And we can deal with everything else after. But we've always said, stop the killing first, and then let's deal with everything else.
Look,
negotiations are the only things that ever brought back hostages, and we're seeing that again.
Well, we'll come back to what's next after. But Dan Feferman, this is an unpalatable deal for the Israeli side to swallow. Thousands of Palestinian prisoners being released. There's a very big grey area over the sort of points 15 to 20 of the Donald Trump peace plan that very clearly says there's no role for Hamas in a future Palestinian state or a Gazan state. How is it landing on the Israeli side? And is Amer right there that Netanyahu might be trying to wriggle out of this?
Well, first of all, I think Trump should have gotten a Nobel Peace Prize for what he did with the Abraham Accords in his first administration. I think that should be clear. But I will agree with my co-panelist here, that this is not yet a peace plan. This is a cessation, a deal to, first of all, end the fighting, get back the hostages, which has really been the sore point from Israel's perspective from the very beginning. And so what you saw when the deal was announced, when it was announced that Israel is going to agree, and then the few tense days before Hamas finally accepted it, and it's not exactly clear what Hamas accepted or not, you saw absolute elation in the streets, in the homes of Israel. For the last 2 years, the families, the friends, the general public here has been, with their hearts absolutely out on their sleeves. This has been just a very sad, tense country in that sense. And so for these hostages, the remaining hostages, to come back is a huge, huge emotional win for the state of Israel. I will disagree with my colleague here. I think Netanyahu got most of what he wanted. Israel, this is not a war Israel wanted to get into in the first place. The problem was from the very beginning is that what Hamas wanted to do was launch an attack, bloody the Israelis, embarrass the Israelis, get thousands and millions across the world to try to isolate Israel with these false and insane accusations of genocide and et cetera. And then, manipulate the media for a ceasefire that lets them do it again and again. I've been reminding people for the last 2 years, there was a ceasefire in place on October 6, 2023, that Hamas broke in order to launch this attack, and for what? And so the terms of the agreement, the other points of the 21 points that Trump put out, actually work for Israel. They don't work for the Israeli far right. They don't work for the Ben Gvir Smotrich elements of the Israeli government, but they work for Netanyahu. They work for the rest of the country because they stipulate that Hamas has to disarm, and Hamas cannot have a future in the governing of Gaza or in any whatever future Palestinian entity ends up taking over. And so I don't think that can be upheld. I don't think Hamas is going to sign basically its own eviction notice from Gaza and from Palestinian politics. In fact, we already see signs in Egypt that they're trying to figure out, through coalition and rebranding, et cetera, they're going to find a way to stay in power. If Hamas can get out of power, if Hamas can release its grip on the Palestinian people, especially in Gaza, I think it's a win for everybody here except Hamas.
We've been talking about this last week, but is there a solution that you see with Hamas remaining in some form of governance in Gaza, or are the terms of that deal going to have to be done to the T of no more Hamas?
Well, if you follow Palestinian and Arabic media, and I think it's been shared a little bit in Western media, Hamas has already said they're okay with not having a role in governance in the future of the Gaza Strip. They understand what the future holds for them. They understand the pressure that's come from Arab countries and from within Palestinian society. So they've already said that. So that's actually not a sticking point. Now, if they participate in some sort of rebranding, I don't know. I mean, Donald Trump knows all about that, you know, going from a reality TV show host to now a statesman who wants the Nobel Peace Prize. Rebranding is right up his alley. But I don't think that's going to happen. You know, like I told you last week, I think they're going to take the deal because the pressure was on. And I think they understand that governance is not in their future. At the end of the day, there'll be a segment of Palestinian society that still, you know, sort of follows their political ideology maybe. But overall, by the way, again, if you study Palestinian society, you know that most of the society is pretty secular in their politics. The ruling party is a secular party. When these states when these countries recognized the state of Israel, they were recognizing the Palestinian Authority and government, which is the secular Fatah party. They weren't recognizing Hamas. In fact, they were doing it in part to marginalize Hamas. So you have to really understand Palestinian politics and understand.
Oh, I think we lost Amer there. Dan's still with us, though. Yeah, Hamas going to skip off into the sunset, walk away. Are we really behind that?
Yeah, I wish they would, and I think everyone wishes they would. And you know, they were offered in the Trump deal.
Real state is eventually going to have to be Palestinians. It's not going to be Tony Blair and Donald Trump.
Amer, we lost you for a moment there, so just bear with us a sec. We'll come back to you in a moment. Dan, carry on. You were making a point about some skepticism that Hamas really are going to walk away.
Look, I mean, you're talking about an absolutely fanatical jihadist terrorist entity that dragged and willingly sacrificed its own people for the sake of trying to inflict a wound on Israel and to get the entire region, you know, going against Israel. So it's very, very hard for me to see that Hamas will do this. The big changes that we have here and that we've had in the past, and I will disagree here again with my colleague on a couple of points that are important to make. Hamas has time and again said it's willing to relinquish political power, but it wants to hold all the guns. Hamas wants a Hezbollah-like model, which again, until recently has worked for Hezbollah, where it controls all the power. It's more powerful than the Lebanese state and the army, but it doesn't have to deal with education, you know, trash collection, taxation, etc. Actually, you know, the adult kind of things of running the Gaza Strip. They want to play terrorist. What brought back the hostages, what brought Hamas to the table, what is forcing Hamas to agree to this, is unfortunately it's military pressure. If only diplomacy would have worked. And you know, it's something. It was a gambit by the Israeli government. It was a gambit backed by the Trump administration. And what we saw that we needed to see, and what we'll need to see in the future to ensure that Hamas is essentially kept in check, is pressure from Hamas's sponsors in the region. That's the Qataris and the Turks. And the Egyptians, the Egyptians are not their sponsors, but they have ways to pressure them. That's really the only way this works. And Hamas is given a lifeline for its leadership. There's one example that I can think of in the entire Middle East in which a jihadist Islamist group, you know, shed its weapons willfully and changed its ways. And that's, if I recall, Gamat al-Islamiyya in Egypt. There's not a whole lot of track records of jihadist organizations doing this. As we say here in Israel, halavai, if only, right? Inshallah, as you say, Amer, if only the Hamas would do this, I think it would be best for everyone except Hamas. We just have to keep our eyes on the ball here and keep up the pressure on Hamas so that they do not have weapons, they do not have the ways to terrorize their people, and that they are really pushed out of Palestinian politics.
Amer, you're shaking your head there. I think you're back with us. You're disagreeing there. It is kind of naive to think these people are going to put down their guns and abandon their genocidal efforts to wipe Israel off the map, isn't it?
Well, Israel's been the one committing a genocide, according to every international legal scholar, including Israeli human rights groups.
You can't start a war and then complain when you lose it, though. I mean, we can toss around that word.
We're not talking about a war, but you can't bomb a whole building because you think there's one bad guy in it, which Israel's been doing since 1948. Look, at the end of the day,
entire infrastructure. It's not one. Come on, let's not be.
At the end of the day, the only thing that is going to stop these things from happening again is freedom and justice for the Palestinian people. 80% of the people who live in Gaza are people who were driven from their homelands in Palestine and places surrounding Gaza in 1948. That's the truth. That's the truth that Israel's going to have to live with. The truth that Israel's going to have to live with is that between the river and the sea and all the lands that Israel controls, there's 7 million Palestinians and 7 million Jews. And as long as we have a system in Israel that says Jews get more rights than non-Jews, that this is the Jewish state. Remember, there's a nation state law in Israel that says this is the state of the Jewish people only. That is what we are talking about when we talk about Israel. There's a reason Desmond Tutu, who actually did win the Nobel Peace Prize, called Israel an apartheid state worse than South Africa. Look, everybody in the world can't be wrong. Everybody in the world can't be making stuff up. I'm not making stuff up. The stories I heard from my grandmother were not made up. She was kicked out and never allowed to come back. This is what we're talking about at the end of the day. It has to be fixed.
That was my grandma.
Amer, stay there. Dan, you can come back on that.
Yeah, first of all, I mean, just because a bunch of sham academics, it's been debunked time and again. It's part of a smear campaign to just throw the word genocide out there 1,000 times until it sticks. By no real metric has this proven to be anything but. Wars are messy. Wars are absolutely messy. People die. And people die in Gaza because Hamas started a war that it knew it couldn't win. It hid behind its civilians. Look, 48 was a war. 48, we should be calling it the Civil War of Palestine. By the way, that the Arabs of Palestine launched against the Jews of Palestine. And my grandparents were also, it's absolutely true. My grandparents were also kicked out of their homes. 2 million Arab citizens of the state of Israel have full and equal rights to me. They pay the same taxes. They actually don't have to serve in the army like I did. But they are full and equal citizens of the state of Israel. My grandparents were actually ethnically cleansed, kicked out of Iraq, as were 800,000 other Jews from Arab lands. And if 22 Arab countries and 50-something Muslim countries can be ethno-states in which Arabs or Muslims have preferential rights, and in fact, very few of these in which minorities can live their ways, Israel might be one of the only places in the Middle East in which Muslims actually have more rights than anywhere else in the region, certainly Christians, Druze, Baha'is, and other minorities. You're welcome to come visit and see for yourself.
Are you going to go and visit and see that?
I don't have to visit. I'm actually a Palestinian from Nazareth. I hold an Israeli passport. And I can tell you that my family there cannot get building permits from the state as easily as their Jewish neighbors. This is not really like open for debate. I know it might be nice to come on a show, Dan, when you think people might not know what you're talking about and they might not know the propaganda you're spreading about the state of Israel as its equal and all this kind of stuff. Everybody knows, look, the toothpaste is out of the tube. You guys are going to have to live with the reality now that everyone knows that Israel is an apartheid state. People can try to buy TikTok, buy CBS News. It's too late. Everyone understands what's going on.
Hang on. I'll pull you up on that one. Going to pull you up on that one. What do you mean people buying TikTok and CBS News? What is that a?
Well, it's Larry Ellison is well known as a major donor to the IDF over many years, a major supporter of Israel, and he's trying to get TikTok if it hasn't been finalized yet. And then, of course, they've acquired Paramount, CBS News. His son is the head of CBS News.
What is the relevance of that, Amer? Go on, explain why that's a relevant point.
Well, as we all know about the power of the media, including this show.
Oh, the power of the media is
yeah, it's not. I know you're trying to get me into talking about a conspiracy, but I'm not.
You're the one that brought it up.
It's very. Look, people in the media and owners of media companies like Rupert Murdoch or other people have certain political points of view. Rupert Murdoch has a conservative point of view, pushes Fox News in that direction. If somebody Elon Musk had a certain political point of view when he bought Twitter and pushed it in that direction. And so it's not about one group of people doing it. It's about rich people having control of the media and putting the media in a certain direction. We all know that Larry Ellison has been wildly pro-Israel for many, many decades now. And the fact that but like I said, it's too late. The toothpaste is out of the tube. Everyone sees Israel for what it is, an apartheid state, just like Desmond Tutu called
You made that point already. Dan, did you hear what I heard there? I mean, we can move on and you can come back to some other stuff, but I think, people controlling the media, I did genuinely think is a topic that's kind of best avoided for the last, mainly the last century, certainly.
Oh, the Chinese were controlling TikTok before that, and Al Jazeera owns an entire, the Qataris own an entire media empire, and so a lot of people are controlling media. if you're insinuating any way that Jews are controlling the media, then we're doing a pretty shitty job of it.
Let's bring it back to the other points that Amer was making.
I wasn't insinuating that at all.
Okay, all right, we'll let it go. Dan, I mean, realistically, you know, both sides want a very different world. But let's talk about the short term. How we actually, you know, we can talk about the big vision and the dream and the, you know, Donald Trump wants to build his Riviera on in Gaza. You know, I've talked to Amer before about his idea of a one-state solution that you know, has both sides in it. How, leaving those aside, what happens in the short term? What happens next week and next month? And how does the rebuilding process happen? How do you know? How is Israel going to play its part in, you know, actually restoring peace and a lasting peace in the region?
Yeah, I mean, one of the, I think, brilliant things about this plan, again, if it's implemented, is that it finally gets the region and the international community, but especially the region, to take ownership and responsibility for what is a regional problem here. You know, I can speak for many Israelis. I can speak for myself, certainly. We'd love to see a moderate, peaceful Gaza rebuilt, that the people of Gaza live there peacefully alongside us. And who knows, maybe in another generation or two that we'll be able to travel freely between each other's states or political entities or whatever it is, just like I can now fly to Dubai or Bahrain or Morocco because of the Abraham Accords. What you're going to see in the next phase after, you're going to see the hostages. We're talking about 20 living hostages. We're talking about another 28, the remains of hostages who died while in Hamas captivity. You're going to see an Israeli withdrawal to agreed upon lines outside of the major Palestinian population areas in Gaza, sort of remaining within the strip and keeping outside of the population areas. And you're going to see a release of a significant number of Palestinian security prisoners in Israeli jails. And then you get to the part two, which is really the big tricky part. And so we really have to look at this as two agreements. One is an immediate ceasefire and the hostilities, let people get back to their lives. And that's going to be difficult for Gazans because unfortunately much of Gaza is in ruins. And then this is where it gets tricky. According to the Trump plan, Hamas has to be disarmed. And there's going to be an interim security force, which will have non-Hamas security personnel trained by the Egyptians, trained by an international consortium, and then an interim government that excludes Hamas. And the big questions here, who's going to disarm Hamas? I mean, that's really the big question.
Yeah, my final point, who is going to disarm Hamas? Obviously, they've come out and said tonight that there's no role for Tony Blair, the former Prime Minister, you know, a controversial choice you might suggest for bringing peace to the Middle East by the Trump White House. But there is a role for Donald Trump, he says, to oversee this sort of transitional power. Who is going to disarm Hamas? Who would you like to see do it? And a final point I'd like to pick your brains on. This is a remarkable opportunity for peace in the Middle East. Unlike many of the other moments we've had in history where we thought we were somewhere, in the fact that there is incredibly wealthy neighbouring states, Arab states, who are saying they're willing to open up their coffers to rebuild Gaza. Do you believe them? And do you believe that this is actually that moment?
Well, I think that we're closer than we've been, and part of it is because of Trump and his vanity, and he wants the Nobel Peace Prize, and he believes in no wars, which is a good thing, finally, to have an American president who believes in that for the most part. Look, at the end of the day, this is all going to have to be done politically. We've seen that the military doesn't work. Israel has the 6th largest military in the world. They weren't able to beat the Hamas militias to a point where they could end everything. That's not going to work. This needs to all be political. Israel needs to decide that it's no longer going to be a system or a state that is preferencing one group of people over another. It's going to have to decide that it doesn't want to take the whole West Bank and stop building settlements in every single pocket of Palestinian land. It's going to have to decide that it doesn't want a government led by ministers like Smotrich, who just a few days ago said, international law doesn't apply to Jews. We are the chosen people. This is what we're dealing with. On the rebuilding, though, it is a remarkable opportunity, right? To utilise. Yes, look, I think billions of dollars will flow in, and hopefully the people of Gaza will be the ones who have the jobs that rebuild, so no one has to leave. This whole thing has been about getting people out of Gaza from the jump, and that didn't work out. That hasn't happened. I think that really shocked the Israelis that the Palestinians didn't leave after these brutal attacks. So yes, there's an opportunity to rebuild, and it can be rebuilt. But at the end of the day, the political solutions are going to have to be negotiated politically.
But I mean, okay, just to pick you up on that one point. I mean, where were they meant to go? Egypt wouldn't take them. Jordan wouldn't take them. Israel wouldn't take them.
They didn't want to go. They didn't want to go. We Palestinians learned a lesson from 1948 that if you flee war, the Israelis don't let you back. And the Israeli ministers have been talking repeatedly about taking Gaza. Not right-wing crazy people in the government.
All right,
we know that.
Dan, very quick final word on that. You were shaking your head there.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a lot of things that are semi-attached to reality here. Those ministers you're talking to are not setting government policy. Israel had no intention of expelling the Gazans from Gaza, and they made it clear in this plan by agreeing to this plan that that's not going to happen. There are those voices in Israel, but they're not the ones making the decisions here. You're going to have to see accountability. This is something that's never been demanded of the Palestinians, and that is accountability. Billions and tens of billions more aid money per capita has flowed in anywhere in the world into Gaza. Unfortunately, it all went to tunnels and rockets. Let's see it go into buildings and skyscrapers and infrastructure so the people can have a normal life there.
All right, Dan, well, this debate, I suspect, will rage on slightly more than whether discussions over whether Donald Trump deserves the Peace Prize. Thanks for joining us tonight. See you again soon. Christina's still with me. There's a suggestion there from Amer that it was, Donald Trump's only doing this because he wants his Nobel Peace Prize. Slightly unfair, right? You know the guy. You've worked closely with him over many, many years. That's not the only motivation here, is it?
No, of course not. I think he genuinely wants to bring peace. Now, it's clear that Donald Trump is very competitive. He's competitive in everything that he does. Even if it were true, which I think he has a lot more, emotional vested interest in this. He doesn't like war. He doesn't like killing. But even if he were doing this as some sort of competitive scorecard, does it matter? I mean, the whole point is that the war stops, the killing stops, and peace can actually come forth in the Middle East. So I don't personally believe that he's doing this for some type of scorecard or Nobel Peace Prize. But even if he were, I'm okay with it.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, the Donald Trump we heard on the campaign trail last year and the Donald Trump we have in the White House now, there was no mention of bombing Iran. There was no mention of him being the sort of Lord High Protector of Palestine in this peace role. We can talk about Ukraine another time because that is obviously a major sticking point. But it's not exactly sticking to his America First, no more world police, mantra that he got elected on. How does this, go down with his core support and his base when he is spending, a lot? Obviously, it's welcome that it's doing it, but is there any backlash towards it?
I think people are watching it cautiously optimistic. Of course, he was voted in on an America First agenda. People are concerned about domestic policy and want to see some domestic changes and improvements. But of course, what he's doing abroad is good. And so I think the base is looking at it going, okay, that's good, but when are we going to focus on American policy? And he's doing, you can walk and chew gum at the same time. So I think he's doing that, but as long as he gets domestic policy, I think he's good.